So just explain a little bit, if you will, what is the points that you're going to make today in your speech, the importance of what you've got to say.
OK, it's not just me. I think it's a large number of others as well. We're getting messages from the front line of our public services now, from health, education, policing, local government now about the care of our children as well. They're all saying now their services are in crisis. They need additional resources. So what we're saying next week, there is a bit of an emergency here that needs to be addressed. We should have the budget addressing those issues. And we're saying to them, now's not the time to continue on with the tax giveaways to the corporations and the rich. And instead of giving away those taxes, we should invest them in those public services. That's not just me saying this. There's a number of Conservative MPs as well. There's sort of cross-party view now that we can't go on with austerity in this scale.
What has been said about what Labour outlined in their manifesto was described by the Institute of Fiscal Studies as suggesting that you would raise borrowing or spending to its highest levels since the mid-1980s, tax levels to record levels in peacetime, and that the tax hikes that you would suggest you would need in order to cover those would hit top earners and businesses, wouldn't raise anything like the £48.6 billion that you're suggesting that you would be needing. That's what they've said. They're independent.
That's true, and other independent think tanks contested that as well. We had 130 economists actually supporting our proposals, so there was a dispute over some of those issues. But actually, for the bulk of our expenditure and for the bulk of our tax-raising powers, they agreed with us. It was not an insignificant sum they disagreed with, but the bulk they agreed with us. But let's talk about next week's budget, because I think it's moved on since the general election. And it's moved on not just in my thinking, but also a number of Conservative MPs are saying exactly the same thing as us. You've got to do something about universal credit. We cannot allow people to get into debt and poverty the way they are. We're seeing people threatened with eviction as a result of the system not working. Got to do something about our public services, particularly the NHS and education. We had the Chief Executive of the NHS saying they need more money now. We're looking at a crisis this winter if we're not careful. In addition to that, head teachers, 5,000 head teachers writing to the Prime Minister saying we need resources. Some of those head teachers are already sending out to parents to get donations in to help fund their schools. Can't be right. And then last weekend, I've never seen this before, we had the person who's advising the government on terrorism, that he's worried that we can't protect ourselves against terrorism because of the cuts in the policing on the beat in our streets. Again, all of those things, I think it's moved on since the general election. I think it's got significantly worse. They've got to address it this time around. And one of the ways they can address it is just stop giving away the taxes to the corporations and the rich. And we saw the Paradise Papers published last week, just at what's happening with regard to tax avoidance as well on an industrial scale. We've got to tackle that as well.
Nothing there was illegal, though, was it?
No,
and
not at all.
One of the reasons, I'm not Philip Hammond, I don't pretend to be inside his mind, but if he is ignoring your warnings and warnings of others, it's because he's trying to balance things elsewhere. We're heading into Brexit. We don't know how much we're going to have to pay for that divorce bill. We need wealth generators. You might say tax them. Tax those businesses is the answer, but then they might go abroad, and we don't know where our trade deal is going to come from.
Be careful what I'm saying, though. I'm saying stop giving our taxes away. In that way, you can balance the books, and at the same time, you can invest in our public services.
But if you close up all those loopholes, those companies will find it much harder to balance their books, and they may be tempted to go abroad.
OK, let me just stop you there. First of all, I'm not talking about the loopholes, first of all. I'm saying about the corporation tax giveaways that he's planning. £76 billion, is now's the time to be giving that money away to corporations who actually are not investing because they're sitting on earned income, last estimate about £580 billion. All we're saying is you need a bit of a balance in this budget. The balance is between stop the tax giveaways to the rich and the corporations, invest in our public services, and, also scrap the pay cap, because that will mean people have more money in their pockets, spend it, and we all gain.
We know that this government isn't massively popular at the moment. Philip Hammond's got a tough job. Theresa May's had a very tough few weeks. Why, then, is Labour and Tory polling the same in terms of popularity? You'd think, as Tony Blair said, you'd be 10, 15% ahead if everybody believes in what you're saying and thinks it's a good thing.
When Labour went 15, 20 points ahead in the polls in the 1990s, it was immediately after the ERM crash. So there was an economic crash at that point in time.
There's a lot of economic worries about...
Yes, there are, but Labour were in power when the crash occurred in 2007, 2008, and we've not recovered to a certain extent from that. We are doing. We've moved ahead in the polls, and, a number of people were predicting only, 6, 8 months ago that we'd be wiped out in the last general election. I said the polls would narrow. I think if the election had gone another couple of weeks, we would have been in power now.